about you, but I look at our tax system and I see it as a mess. I see deductions and I see special offshore provisions. I see things going on that make no common sense to me. Now, I go back to the biblical story of the widow and her mite. It is my opinion that everyone ought to give something for living in this country. Everybody should. Do you know that right now between 36 and 39% of the people who file federal income tax pay no tax? If my math is right, by the year 2012, over 50% of tax filers will pay no income tax. Now, I want you to envision an America where a majority of people are not paying taxes, but they have the political will and the political power to look at that minority that is paying taxes and say, we're going to raise your rates a little bit. And the people who are paying taxes will have very little influence over whether that happens or not. Everyone should be paying something. Now, we have a moral and a Christian, and I will tell you, I think we're a Christian nation, though my president would disagree with me, I think. I think we have a Christian responsibility to care for the widow, the orphan, and the genuinely afflicted. That is the right thing to do. But we do not have an obligation to care for people who just choose not to work. So what you're seeing here is we have got to enact legislation to do away with this thing that gives corporations the ability to hide money somewhere else and gives people the ability to put things in offshore bank accounts. And we need, I believe, a flat tax, and that's what I would propose. Now, I will also point out the second bullet up here that you see, and that is, I don't think we have the constitutional right to pick a group and say, you need to pay more taxes, but other people don't. And this is another area that our representative and I disagree on. You may remember the bank bailout bill, the TARP as it was called, the $700 billion package of loans for Wall Street banks. On the tail end of that, Barney Frank, whom you all know and love, I'm sure, introduced legislation that said, you know, the banks that got federal money, we need to tax the bonuses that those people earn at a rate of 90%. Now, there was a very popular movement at the time, and it said, heck yes, those people are making $100 million, they shouldn't make that much, we need to tax them, and we need to take that money back. But what the legislators didn't consider was that for some of those financial workers that were making maybe $50,000 a year, their only income that year was their bonus check because that's how their contracts were written. And by this law, they had 90% of their income seized. Folks, that is fundamentally un-American, it is unfair, and it is unconstitutional. We can't do that. Now, I found it interesting that not long ago, my opponent in this primary race was asked, how are we going to pay for health care? We'll talk about that here in a couple minutes. And he said, well, some people are proposing putting a higher tax on people with a high income. And his response was, I don't think we can do that because that's unconstitutional. But ironically, he voted in favor of that bonus tax. But you can be assured that if I'm put in office, I will oppose anything like that. This is where we talk about this notion of professional politicians. And I am not, I never want to be one. I will tell you, I spent 12 years of my life in our nation's work-free drug place, and listen to that term carefully, Washington, D.C. And I will tell you, I've got no burning desire to go back and live there. But I do want to go back and serve. But my vision for this is, go do it a couple of terms. Make the changes that the people want. Listen to the people. Go do that. And then come back home to Northwest Arkansas, and then it's your turn. 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 Elected representatives are supposed to represent the people. I will propose a constitutional amendment to limit terms of office to 3 terms for everybody. Okay, let's talk about immigration, and we'll have a longer discussion on that here in just a couple minutes. But I am not talking about legal immigration. I'm talking about illegal immigration. My mother was born in Czechoslovakia. My father's parents were both born in Czechoslovakia. I am 100% immigrant, and you know what? I'll bet most everyone here can trace their lineage back very quickly to some group of people who boldly came across the sea. So I'm not talking about that. But folks, we have got hundreds of billions of dollars in cost. We're seeing our culture be weakened by people who sort of kind of want to be here but don't want to enculture themselves in our language and our customs. And that's got to stop. And we need to enforce the laws that we have. And again, we can talk about that in a bit. But the first thing I will introduce is a statute that says we will use no federal funds for anyone who is here illegally except to provide emergency medical assistance and basic subsistence until they can be expeditiously returned to their country of origin. Let me be clear, I do not oppose immigration. But let me be equally clear, I oppose anyone who systematically breaks the laws of the land. And there's been a great deal of talk from the conservative side, so-called, from the liberal side. We need to put some process in place where people who are here illegally and contributing so well to our government can be made legal. Folks, the way to make them legal is to ask them to leave and then come back the right way. Now, another thing that has fallen off the scope lately because of healthcare debate, and I seriously believe that there's political strategy there, is this whole discussion of energy. Folks, go back 3 or 4 years ago, we weren't paying what we are for gas. And I'm convinced that the problem is that we have political forces that are driving a good bit of our energy policy. And what we need to do is open this to a free market. Yes, we need to drill. Yes, we need to drill offshore. And yes, we need to license more nuclear power plants in the United States of America. Did you know that most every nation in Europe gets more of its energy from nuclear power than we do? Do you know that we haven't licensed new nuclear plants in this country for decades? And that's got to stop. Next year. Now, I don't know what your experience is in talking to your elected officials. And I've talked about this before. I write lots of letters. Blanche Lincoln won't send me letters anymore. I'm not sure that makes me sad. Mark Pryor will send me letters, but more often than not, the letter doesn't answer the question I asked. And I will say this about our incumbent representative, John Bozeman. He's very good about writing letters. And he writes handwritten notes, and I think that endears him to a lot of people. I will tell you that I think that that doesn't mitigate where he is on these significant legislative issues, but he does correspond. Well, I will tell you other events that I've had, and I've talked to a lot of law enforcement officers. Our son-in-law, Billy Turnbow, is on the Springdale PD. My son, Lowell, is on the Springdale PD. So we have a good dialogue. And one of the things they talk about is one of the union representatives from the firefighters union was saying, I can't even go see these representatives. They won't even see me. And folks, you may not be aware, and I'm not accusing any of our representatives of using it, but I know from my time in D.C., they look on a donors list, some of them. And they say, are you on the donors list? I'm really busy. I can't see you right now because you're not on that list. I will promise you that my whole principle is access. And I will not see lobbyists. In my view, the constituents are the lobbyists that I care about. Now, I'd like to talk very quickly about this whole notion of listening to the constituents. We talked about what